To thine own self be true. Funny, isn't it? A sentence so simple that almost anyone can understand it, and yet so many people spend years doing the exact opposite. They become true to everyone else before they ever learn how to be true to themselves. They lower their voice to keep the peace. They swallow their anger to protect a relationship. They apologize for wounds they never caused because losing someone feels more frightening than losing pieces of themselves. They call it loyalty. They call it patience. They call it maturity. They call it love. But sometimes what looks like love from the outside is actually fear wearing beautiful clothes. Fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of disappointing someone. Fear that if you finally become honest about what hurts, the person you love will walk away. So you compromise. Then you compromise again. Then you compromise one more time. Until eventually you look at your life and realize you have become incredibly good at being someone other people can live with, and strangely unfamiliar with the person living inside your own body. That is where self-loss begins. Not with one dramatic decision. Not with one terrible night. It begins quietly. One silence. One swallowed truth. One, it's okay when it wasn't. One, don't worry about it when you were already hurting. One more time choosing their comfort over your honesty. And because each individual compromise looks small, you don't notice what they are building together. Until one day you realize they have built a life in which there is barely any room left for you. You became softer than your truth, smaller than your needs, quieter than your pain. Easier to understand, easier to manage, easier to disappoint. And perhaps the saddest part is that some people will allow you to do it. They will watch you bend and never ask why you're bending. They will enjoy the peace created by your silence. They will accept your sacrifice as if it were simply your personality. And eventually you may begin to believe that this is what love requires. But listen carefully. Love should not require your disappearance. You should never have to destroy yourself in order to prove that you care about someone, because there is a difference between sacrifice and self-abandonment. Sacrifice is something you choose freely. Self-abandonment is what happens when you become afraid that being yourself will cost you the relationship. And there is a terrible sadness in realizing that you are not simply losing someone. You were losing yourself trying to keep them. You rarely lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in permissions. You permit one disrespect because it's not worth an argument. You permit another because they didn't mean it. You stay quiet because everyone is tired. You smile because the room already feels tense. You accept something you don't want because saying no feels selfish. And every time you override your own truth, you teach yourself that your feelings are negotiable. Eventually, your inner voice becomes quieter, not because it disappeared, but because you stopped listening. A person can become incredibly skilled at ignoring themselves. They can walk into a room and immediately sense what everybody else needs. They know when someone is upset. They know when to apologize. They know when to change the subject. They know when to smile. They know when to disappear. But ask them what they need and suddenly they have no answer. That is not always kindness. Sometimes it is a lifetime of adaptation. Think about the person who laughs at a joke that humiliates them because they don't want to embarrass the person who made it think about the daughter who accepts criticism disguised as concern because she has been taught that disagreeing with family makes her ungrateful. Think about the friend who answers every call, solves every crisis, gives every ounce of energy because somewhere inside they are terrified that saying no will make them replaceable. Think about the employee who always says yes because being dependable has become the foundation of their identity. This is how people disappear. Not through storms, through negotiations, tiny private agreements made against themselves. I'll tolerate this. I'll stay quiet. I'll forgive again. I'll give them one more chance. I'll explain myself better. I'll try harder. And sometimes trying harder is exactly what keeps you trapped. Because if a relationship requires you to become smaller every time there is conflict, the problem is not that you haven't tried hard enough. The problem is that the relationship has become dependent on your self-abandonment. And there are people who don't fall in love with your soul. They fall in love with your adjustments. They love how understanding you are, how quickly you forgive, how easily you calm things down, how rarely you complain, how available you remain, how much emotional work you do without asking for recognition. They may tell you you're different from everyone else, but sometimes what they really mean is you tolerate what others would not. They may tell you, I love how easy you are to talk to, but perhaps they love that you never make them uncomfortable enough to confront themselves. They may tell you, you're the one person I can always count on. And it sounds beautiful until you realize that the relationship only works because you keep giving while they keep receiving. Then something changes. You begin healing, you become more honest, you become less available for disrespect. You stop apologizing for every boundary, you stop explaining yourself endlessly. You start saying no, and suddenly they tell you, you've changed. Yes, you have, but maybe that is not a confession. Maybe it is evidence that something inside you is finally alive again. Growth often looks offensive to people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They don't always say, I miss having control over you. Instead, they say, I don't know what's happened to you. I liked you better before. You've become selfish. You're so distant now, you used to care, and sometimes the truth is simple. You still care. You just don't care at the expense of yourself anymore. There is a difference. Do not confuse being missed with being valued. Someone can miss your availability without valuing your humanity. They can miss the version of you who always answered, the version who always forgave, the version who always came running, the version who never questioned the arrangement. They may not miss you. They may miss the access they had to you. And that distinction can change your entire understanding of a relationship. One of the saddest things a human being can do is compete with their own pain just to remain lovable. Someone hurts you, and before you allow yourself to feel it, you start defending them. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe you should be more patient. Look at what you've done. Someone else wounded you, and somehow you became the person standing trial. You are the one explaining their behavior. You are the one minimizing your pain. You are the one trying to prove that your own feelings are unreasonable. That is how self-betrayal becomes sophisticated. You don't simply hide your pain. You convince yourself that you shouldn't have felt it. A wife cries alone and wipes her face before walking back into the room because she doesn't want to be called dramatic. A man gets mocked in front of his family and turns the humiliation into a joke before anyone else can laugh at him. A friend repeatedly dismisses your feelings, and eventually you begin saying it's not a big deal, even though you lie awake thinking about it. You become so skilled at making your pain acceptable that eventually nobody realizes you are hurting. And perhaps you don't realize it either, because you have learned to call silence patience. You have learned to call exhaustion devotion. You have learned to call fear loyalty. But patience without truth can become denial. Kindness without boundaries can become self-erasure. And there is nothing noble about turning your suffering into background music so everyone else can remain comfortable. The people who genuinely love you may not understand you perfectly. They may make mistakes. They may disappoint you. They may need time to grow. But healthy love does not require you to become invisible. It does not demand that you silence yourself so someone else can feel safe. It does not need you disfigured in order to remain affectionate. And this does not happen only in romantic relationships. Sometimes you lose yourself at work, you become the dependable one. The person who always says yes. The person who stays late. The person who answers messages after hours. The person who fixes problems nobody else wants to handle. At first it feels good. People trust you, they praise you, they tell you how valuable you are, but eventually you realize something uncomfortable. They may not value you. They may value what you provide. There is a difference. Being needed is not the same as being respected. Being praised is not the same as being protected. A workplace can celebrate your dedication while quietly consuming your health. A manager can call you exceptional while continually increasing your workload. A team can say they couldn't function without you while never asking what functioning like that is costing you. And if your worth begins to depend on how much you can carry, you will eventually become afraid to put anything down. You stay late, you answer early, you remain available, you solve problems, you absorb tension. And when your body finally starts saying enough, you don't ask, why is this costing me so much? You ask, how can I become better at enduring it? That question should frighten you, because the world can reward self-abandonment before it destroys you. Praise can become addictive. Being indispensable can feel like security. Being the strongest person in the room can feel like identity. But you are a human being before you are an employee. A person before you are a provider. A soul before you are a function. Pay attention to who values you when you are not producing. Who respects your limits? Who still treats you with dignity when you make a mistake? Who allows you to rest without making you feel guilty? Who sees your humanity instead of only your output? Those answers matter. Because if people only appreciate the version of you that is exhausted, endlessly productive, and permanently available, then they are connected to your function, not your worth. And then there is family. Family can be one of the hardest places to reclaim yourself because family carries history. You remember the sacrifices, the meals, the years, the protection, the difficult seasons, the people who raised you, the people you grew up beside. And because you remember what they gave you, you may feel guilty acknowledging what hurt you. That is where things become complicated. Father may call harsh criticism preparing you for life. A mother may call control concern. A sibling may turn your vulnerabilities into jokes and then accuse you of becoming distant when you stop sharing them. A family may unconsciously assign one person the role of peacemaker, the reasonable one, the strong one, the one who understands everyone, the one who apologizes first, the one who keeps the family together. And if that person is you, listen carefully. Being strong does not mean being endlessly available for other people's dysfunction. The strong one is often the one who receives the least permission to be tired. Everyone expects them to understand. Everyone expects them to forgive. Everyone expects them to absorb. And because they are capable, more gets placed on their shoulders, until eventually they become the emotional shock absorber of the entire family. They translate rude comments, they excuse bad behavior, they calm arguments, they protect everyone's feelings, and somehow they feel guilty for needing a break. But respecting your family does not require you to participate in your own disappearance. You can love people and still tell the truth. You can honor your parents and still have boundaries. You can forgive someone without giving them unlimited access to you. You can remain kind without pretending that harm did not happen. Sometimes you have to stop calling suffocation duty. That is not rebellion. That is clarity. There comes another stage in self-loss when you stop trusting your own feelings. You feel hurt and immediately investigate yourself. Am I overreacting? Was it really that bad? Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I should be more patient. You have become so accustomed to questioning yourself that your own emotions feel like unreliable witnesses. But your body often remembers what your mind keeps explaining away. Your jaw stays tense. Your sleep becomes shallow. Your stomach tightens when a certain person's name appears on your phone. Your body prepares itself before certain people even enter the room. Your laughter becomes forced. Your silence becomes heavy. Sometimes the body speaks because the mouth has been trained to postpone the truth. And this is where healing begins. Not when you finally convince everyone else. When you finally stop arguing against your own experience. You begin with small things. You stop laughing at the joke that humiliates you. You stop answering immediately when guilt demands urgency. You let silence exist. You say, that hurt me. And you don't add 20 apologies afterward. You say, I don't agree. You say, I can't do that. You say, I need some space. Simple sentences. But if you have spent years abandoning yourself, those sentences can feel terrifying. Some people will react badly. They may call you cold, difficult, selfish, dramatic, changed. Let them. The return to yourself will often look like disrespect to people who benefited from your absence. That does not mean you are wrong. It means their comfort may have depended on your discomfort. And yes, there will be grief, real grief. You may lose relationships when you stop losing yourself. You may discover that some connections were held together by your constant emotional discounts. You may discover that certain people only knew how to love the edited version of you. That can hurt deeply. But don't automatically call it failure. Sometimes a relationship ending after you become honest is not proof that honesty destroyed it. It may be proof that dishonesty was holding it together. There is a special cruelty in being loved only while you are useful. Many people mistake usefulness for intimacy. People need you. They call you when they have problems. They trust your advice. They rely on your strength. They tell you that you're one of the few people they can count on and that can feel like love until you need something, until you become unavailable, until you ask for reciprocity, until you stop rescuing. Then, suddenly the relationship changes. The calls become shorter, the warmth becomes conditional, the patience disappears, and you begin to see something you couldn't see while you were constantly giving. Some relationships were being fed by your exhaustion. That realization can humiliate you, because you thought you were deeply loved, but perhaps you were deeply useful, and being useful is not meaningless. Generosity matters. Helping people matters. Supporting someone through a difficult season matters. But support becomes unhealthy when it becomes the price of belonging. You should not have to destroy your peace to prove that you care. You should not have to remain exhausted to prove that you are loyal. You should not have to be everyone's emergency contact while having nobody you can call when your own life falls apart. Real love has reciprocity, not perfect reciprocity, not mathematical equality, but a willingness to care about the person who is always caring. And sometimes the truth becomes obvious the moment you close the gate. Stop rescuing. Stop over-explaining. Stop being instantly available. Stop solving every crisis. Protect your time. Protect your energy. And watch. The truth will reveal itself. Some people will respect the boundary. Others will become offended by it. And that reaction tells you something. If someone becomes angry simply because you stopped giving them unlimited access, their anger is information. Don't let guilt erase that information. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools of self-abandonment. It tells you that protecting yourself is cruel. It tells you that saying no means you don't care. It tells you that choosing rest means you're selfish. But guilt is not always a sign that you've done something wrong. Sometimes guilt is simply the emotional echo of an old role you're finally leaving. You can care about someone and still say no. You can love someone and still step back. You can understand someone's pain and refuse to become the place where they repeatedly deposit it. Understanding someone does not require volunteering to be wounded by them forever. That is a truth worth remembering. There is also a special kind of prison where you become skilled at making your pain sound reasonable to the person causing it. You don't tell them the full truth. You edit it. You soften it. You make it easier to hear, maybe I'm being sensitive. I know you didn't mean it that way. It's okay. I just felt a little uncomfortable. But underneath those sentences may be something much simpler. That hurt me. I don't want this anymore. I am tired of being treated this way. I am afraid that if I tell you the truth, your affection will disappear. And that last sentence explains so much, because sometimes the real fear isn't conflict. It's the loss of connection after conflict. You fear that honesty will be punished. Maybe the punishment is anger. Maybe it is silence. Maybe it is withdrawal. Or maybe it is mockery. Maybe it is that look someone gives you that makes you feel like you ruined everything by speaking. So you become an emotional diplomat. You manage the atmosphere. You choose the perfect moment. You soften your language. You predict their reaction. You prepare explanations, you prepare apologies, you prepare yourself for every possible outcome, and eventually you realize you are carrying the emotional architecture of the entire relationship on your back. No wonder you are tired. You aren't simply communicating, you are managing everyone else's emotions while neglecting your own. That is not sustainable. And eventually you begin envying people who can simply say what they mean, people who can disappoint someone without believing they are bad, people who can say no, and still sleep peacefully. People who can leave a room without carrying every face home with them. You may think they are cold. Maybe they aren't. Maybe they simply learned something you were never taught, that another person's disappointment does not automatically mean you have done something wrong. You cannot make your truth small enough for every ego in your life and still expect to feel alive. At some point, your life has to become large enough to contain your own truth. And then comes another difficult realization. Sometimes self-loss changes your memory. You stop remembering what happened. You remember the explanation you were given for what happened. The insult becomes a stressful moment. The betrayal becomes a misunderstanding. The humiliation becomes they didn't mean it. The pattern becomes everyone has flaws. Yes, everyone has flaws. But not every flaw requires you to disappear. Healing can change the way you remember your past. You begin seeing old moments differently. The joke wasn't harmless. The apology wasn't sincere. The concern was actually control. The help came with a price. The affection disappeared whenever you disagreed. And when you finally see the pattern, grief arrives. Not only grief for what they did, grief for what you called it. Grief for the years you spent protecting a story that protected everyone except you. Grief for the younger version of yourself who learned that peace mattered more than truth. Grief for how many times you called endurance love. That grief is painful, but it is also cleansing, because anger can sometimes be healthy when it is honest. Not hatred, not revenge, not cruelty, clean anger, the kind that says, I will not keep pretending this doesn't hurt. I will not keep explaining away what is happening to me. I understand your wounds, but I will not spend the rest of my life being wounded by them. That is not bitterness. That is a boundary beginning to breathe, and eventually you reach the hardest stage, returning to yourself. It is not glamorous. There is no perfect speech, no magical morning, no single conversation that suddenly makes everyone understand. Most of the time, returning to yourself is awkward. It is saying no and then feeling guilty. It is setting a boundary and wondering whether you were too harsh. It is refusing to over-explain and then lying awake wondering whether you should send another message. It is choosing rest and feeling undeserving of it. It is disappointing someone who became accustomed to immediate access. That discomfort does not necessarily mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes your nervous system reacts to freedom like it is danger because captivity became familiar. If you have spent years making everyone comfortable, discomfort may feel like failure. But discomfort can be the price of becoming honest. So don't run back simply because honesty feels unfamiliar. You will grieve. You will miss people. You may even miss the old version of yourself. The version who tolerated everything. The version who always knew how to keep the peace. The version who could enter any room and immediately become whatever everyone needed. Don't hate that version of you. That version was trying to protect you. It learned how to survive. Thank it. But don't let survival become your permanent identity. You are allowed to outgrow the person you had to become in order to survive. And when you do, some people will react strongly. They may tell you that you abandoned them. They may say you are selfish. They may remind you of everything they have done for you. They may speak about love while mourning the loss of access. Listen carefully. What exactly are they grieving? Your presence, or your availability, your heart, or your obedience, the relationship? Or the arrangement? You don't have to answer those questions for them. Their reaction belongs to them. Your responsibility is to remain honest with yourself. Choose the awkward boundary. Choose the slower response. Choose the honest answer. Choose the silence that doesn't rush to rescue everyone. Choose the version of mercy that includes you. You do not have to become hard. That is not the lesson. Don't become cruel because someone was cruel to you. Don't become cold because someone mishandled your warmth. Don't stop caring. Become discerning. Let your kindness have structure. Let your generosity have limits. Let your love have wisdom. Let your presence be something you offer, not something people are entitled to consume. And eventually something beautiful happens. You realize that many people never actually knew you. They knew your adaptation. They knew the diplomatic version, the forgiving version, the useful version, the version who always understood, the version who rarely asked for anything. They mistook your coping mechanism for your personality. They praised your self-erasure because it made you easy to love. You're so easygoing. You never make things difficult. You're always there. You understand me better than anyone. Those statements can sound beautiful, but they become dangerous when the only reason they are true is because you keep abandoning yourself. What happens when you stop? What happens when you remain kind but become discerning? What happens when you still listen but no longer tolerate everything? What happens when you still love but stop proving your love through suffering? The room changes. Some people will grow with you, others will resist you, and there may be a lonely period between the two. You may find yourself standing in a strange corridor. You cannot go back to who you were, but you haven't yet found all the people who know how to love who you are becoming. That corridor can feel lonely. You may miss being needed. You may miss rescuing people because rescuing them gave you a reason not to confront your own needs. You may miss the old identity because familiarity can feel like safety even when it was painful. This is where people often return to self-erasure. They become available again. They start over-explaining. They say yes too quickly. They start proving themselves again. But don't. Don't go back simply because the new life feels unfamiliar. You are not selfish for wanting peace. You are not difficult because you have standards. You are not cruel because you need reciprocity. You are not unlovable because you finally became honest. You do not have to earn love by becoming easier to consume. You do not have to prove loyalty by surviving emotional starvation. Some people have spent years starving with grace, starving with manners, starving so quietly that nobody noticed the famine. Let that end. Let the old performance end. You don't have to keep performing the version of yourself that everyone else found convenient. The mature version of you will not become cruel. It will become clear, calm, steady, discerning, less impressed by guilt, less frightened by disappointment, more protective of time, more honest about cost, more faithful to truth. And eventually you will meet people who don't need you to disappear in order to feel loved. They won't need your pain hidden. They won't require unlimited access to your time. They won't punish you for having boundaries. They won't need you exhausted to feel important. They will know how to meet a whole person. And until those people arrive, keep returning to yourself. Even when your voice shakes, even when your heart feels guilty, even when someone misunderstands you, trembling truth is still better than polished self-betrayal. So ask yourself the question you may have been avoiding for years. What exactly have you been willing to trade just to avoid being left? Your sleep, your peace, your honesty, your standards, your voice, your natural laughter, your boundaries, your ability to say no, your ability to trust your own feelings, your relationship with yourself? What have you traded? Because sometimes the tragedy is not simply that someone took too much. It is that you slowly convinced yourself the transaction was love. But losing yourself will never guarantee that someone stays. At best, it postpones the inevitable. At best, it preserves a relationship that can only survive when you are silent. At best, it buys temporary affection from someone who prefers your obedience to your authenticity. That is not peace, that is rented affection. And rented affection always sends the bill somewhere. Eventually, the bill appears in your exhaustion, in your resentment, in your numbness, in your sleepless nights, in the sadness you cannot explain, in the heaviness you feel when their name appears on your phone. Your soul keeps records even when your mind keeps making excuses. And perhaps that is why you have been so tired. Not simply because life is difficult. Life is difficult for everyone. You are tired because you have been carrying people while leaving yourself behind at the door. You are tired because your mercy had no boundaries. You are tired because you kept trying to make other people's hearts comfortable while your own heart was quietly breaking. And maybe now finally you are ready to stop. Not with hatred, not with revenge, not with bitterness, with clarity, with dignity, with truth. You can stop chasing explanations from people who benefited from your confusion. You can stop trying to convince people who have already decided not to understand you. You can stop apologizing for protecting what matters. You can become less reachable where you are only being consumed. You can let silence answer manipulation. You can stop responding to every emotional emergency. You can pray. You can breathe. You can rest. You can move slowly. You can take your time. You can protect your peace without becoming cruel. You can finally stop auditioning for love by demonstrating how much pain you can survive. Enough. Enough smiling while shrinking. Enough explaining while erasing. Enough calling collapse patience. Enough believing exhaustion is proof of devotion. Enough being the soft place where everyone lands while nobody learns how to hold you. Enough. But don't let your healing turn you into the thing that hurt you. Stay kind. Stay principled, stay truthful, stay awake. Let your heart remain soft before God and wise before people. Let your kindness have discernment. Let your mercy have boundaries. Let your love have self-respect. And if someone says you've changed, let them. You have. If someone says you're harder to reach, let them. Perhaps you finally stopped leaving the door unlocked for everyone. If someone mourns the version of you who never protected themselves, let them mourn. That version of you kept everyone else warm while standing outside in the cold. The person you are becoming may still shake when speaking, may still cry after setting a boundary, may still feel lonely after walking away, may still question themselves sometimes, but they are real. And reality, even when painful, is a better place to live than a beautiful lie. So the next time you find yourself desperate to keep someone, stop. Take a breath and ask yourself something deeper than, how do I make them stay? Ask, what am I abandoning in myself to make them stay? That is the question that changes everything, because maybe the person you have been trying hardest to save isn't them. Maybe it is you. Maybe the person you've been neglecting for years is still standing somewhere inside you, waiting patiently, waiting for you to listen, waiting for you to stop explaining away the pain, waiting for you to stop calling fear love, waiting for you to stop treating your own needs like an inconvenience, waiting for you to come home. So come home, not to the person you were before the hurt, not to the version of yourself that tolerated everything. Come home to something deeper, to truth, to dignity, to discernment, to peace, to the quiet understanding that you can love people without losing yourself inside them. You can walk away without hating them. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can care without carrying everything. You can be gentle without being available to every form of disrespect. And you can finally understand this. The people who are truly meant to remain in your life will not require you to disappear in order to keep them. They may challenge you. They may disagree with you. They may misunderstand you sometimes, but they will not ask you to betray yourself as the price of belonging. So if you have lost yourself trying to keep them, don't spend the rest of your life searching for a way to keep them find yourself. And when you do, don't apologize for coming back. You were gone long enough. Bring your voice home. Bring your boundaries home, bring your laughter home, bring your honesty home, bring your peace home, bring the parts of yourself you abandoned in the name of being loved. Bring them all back. Because the goal was never to become impossible to leave. The goal was to become impossible to abandon yourself. And when you finally learn that, you will understand something beautiful. You did not need to become less of yourself to deserve love. You needed to become more faithful to yourself. So be true to yourself, not selfishly, not cruelly, not arrogantly, truthfully. And if someone leaves because you finally became honest, let them leave, grieve them, bless them, learn from them. But do not follow them into the graveyard of your own identity. You have already sacrificed enough. Now live, now breathe, now speak, now choose, now return. And this time, when you look in the mirror, make sure the person looking back at you is someone you recognize, someone you trust, someone you no longer abandon just to keep somebody else from walking away, because losing them may hurt, but losing yourself was never the price you were meant to pay.